is Steve, your friendly neighborhood lawn gnome, and welcome to hell. That is right. We are back with another episode of Ninth Circle, but oh boy. First of all, let me introduce the fact that Cammie is here today. Cammie, I hope that all is well with you, and I can definitely see that you are glowing because you are now officially in your favorite time of year.
I'm telling you, I'm watching all the horror and reading all of the scary books. So yes, the October is my happy month. So I'm in a great mood.
Yeah, that's wonderful to hear. But I don't really know what to say in summation of what we're going to be discussing today. Obviously, I think because it's been a while since we've talked about the Ninth Circle titles, I think it would be important to, dare I say, circle back to all the people who are new and all the people who have been watching. First of all, welcome to everyone. So great to have you. Don't forget to leave comments, like, hit those notification bells, subscribe so you're up to date. So, The Ninth Circle was a title of a series of horror novels that was developed by Garth Ennis and a team of other creative minds over at Image Comics, these magazine-style books, all individual one-shots depicting some kind of a theme of horror. And it started with Garth Ennis's book, Freddy the Fix. Cammie and I already talked about it. We both had differing opinions about it, but we just wanted to see where things would go. And I don't really know what is going to happen with Ninth Circle because the titles are originally supposedly were supposed to be coming out once a month, and now they're almost all the time on hiatus or getting pushed back. Really upset about one specific title that was supposed to come out before the one that we're talking about today, and that was Stay Out of the Woods. That one's been put on hold indefinitely. And as far as I know, the only other Ninth Circle book that's coming out in the next couple of weeks is a book called The Gray Lady, which I'm going to read because it does seem interesting to me. We're going to be talking about the second entry of Garth Ennis's into the Ninth Circle series, and that is The Kids. So, I have to say that when I read this book, I was disturbed. Very much disturbed. But in summation, I thought that the idea was very interesting, but this book is sloppily done. It really, really is. Yeah. What I am very intrigued by is the fact that there's a certain horror element in this that seems to be something that a lot of horror creatives are starting to come back to. And that is the concept of the witch and dark witchcraft. Because in 2025, still here, guys, we're almost done, but one of my favorite movies, if not one of the best movies of 2025 that came out this year, was a movie that revolved around witches, and that was the movie Weapons. I remember when I first saw the trailer, and not just the trailer itself, but seeing the very well put together casting of actors like Josh Brolin and Benedict Wong and a lot of famous faces that a lot of people know. And just the idea and how much mystery the trailers gave off made me want to go see this movie. And again, Cammie, you know me. I am somewhat a big horror fan in the world of comics, but overall not a big horror fan. And this was one of the most beautifully crafted films that I had ever seen. So to see that kind of a theme put into this comic book and just done completely wrong is sad to me. And before I let you go into this, I know, Cammie, you got a lot to say, but there's another thing that I really want to say, and that's just the fact that this is a book written by Garth Ennis. I don't recall us talking about Garth Ennis in this way when we touched on Freddy the Fix when we started this little segment, which I would probably say it's coming to an end at this point. But when I was reading comic books in the 90s, Garth Ennis was the it factor. He really was the hottest writer in books. In Image Comics, they had their independent labels by the creators and the founders of the company. Then Mark Silvestri's company, Top Cow, pretty much got the upper echelon of everybody. And Garth Ennis was already starting over at DC with a very popular comic book, Preacher. And then he went on to do The Darkness, which was also very, very popular. So when I got back into comics and I found out that he was going to be coming out with a book with Liam Sharp called Batman Reptilian, I got really excited because it was Garth Ennis. I remembered Garth Ennis from my childhood, and I could not even get over how terrible that Batman story was. So I sort of had a little bit of hope when he was doing this whole Ninth Circle title. I thought Freddy the Fix was interesting and fun, but not really the best thing I ever read. But the kids, I wonder, like so many other creators that I enjoyed when it comes to their older work, this man has truly fallen from grace. And I will shut up now.
No, I think it's great because you have a history with him and I don't. This honestly is my first introduction to Garth Ennis, and he comes with a great reputation. So I was having really high expectations for this series when you told me about it and you wanted to read it together. Of course, there's nothing that you suggest that I say no to, pretty much. So I knew we were going to read it nonetheless, but I was excited about it because, like you said, you know, you hear the name Garth Ennis, you know he's good. The stories are I wouldn't say they're badly written, they're just poorly executed. And I feel that when you have an idea and a concept, if you don't fully flush it through and you just throw it out into the universe, even if it's supposed to be bizarre and weird and catch people off guard, you still should have a beginning, middle, and end. You should still have some fluidity within the story, within the context of the story. I feel like in this particular one, I was excited because I saw very quickly where it was going, but it got crass really fast. And I've used that term with this series many times. I used it with Freddy the Fix. And I just wasn't expecting the enormous amount of nudity that we got. I just felt like it was thrown in your face. And again, I'm not a prude. You know, I can see some breasts, I can see a penis, and I'm okay, I can continue on with the comic. I'm not going to just, asphyxiate my eyes on those things. There's some story to tell. I thought I consider her the main character. I don't even consider the parents of the child that we seem to be asphyxiated with the main characters. I know that they're strong kind of sidebar characters, but I really feel like the old lady is it. You know, she is understood to be a witch. She even refers to herself as such. Maybe she is. I don't know. I think she's just kind of the tale as old as time. She's the neighborhood lady. In a way, it almost felt to me like she was going to be a kid. It kind of felt like that's where the writing was going. Like maybe she grew up too fast, but then somehow became an elderly, kid. And now she's trying to fix this malfunction, this I don't know, this portal that opened, I don't even know how this happened. And that's the thing. Like,
Yeah,
there's so much that goes on, but then nothing is explained. Like, why? Maybe that's it. Maybe you're not supposed to know the why. But I think in horror, that is the number one question you ask. Why? Why is this happening? Why did we get here? Why did this make this happen? It's the age old, it's like the biggest question of all in life is the why behind it. And we don't get the why with it.
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the main things that he definitely tried to do was really push the story forward via shock value. Because basically, what is this all about? Basically, we start with this family, and they're putting their newborn or their very young baby boy to sleep for the night. And then all of a sudden, in the middle of the night, they hear a loud crash and they hear an unusual sound. And then they see this gigantic, naked man in their basically had broken through the baby's crib and they can't find their baby anywhere. And then all of a sudden, when they look outside, they see other naked people, like literally hobbling through the street. And then all of a sudden, they start to put two and two together. Or do they really put two and two together? Because there's not really much that tries to connect everything. And then basically from that point on to the end, I just got to say, I am bored. I was bored to tears while I was reading this story. Granted, even though there were some really grotesque, unusual things, but at the same time, they make so much sense. And I gotta give Garth Ennis credit for that. Like the scene where one of the adult infants, if you will, basically pokes their eye out with a it makes so much sense because this is what babies do. They feel things, they want to explore things, but they don't realize because these are adults in baby form that they have much more strength, or the fact that they get hit by cars or they cut themselves with glass. The scene in the infant ward in the hospital is creepy. That
Mhm.
is definitely one of the parts that really hits home with me. But again, because of the fact that to me there's no substance and the story is so messed up and convoluted and confusing, it just
And
doesn't really hit you
and
that
that's
you're
what I
really
mean
reading
about
this.
not being fully fleshed out. Like he has all these ideas and they're great, but I don't think sometimes he remembers how many pages there are going to be to this issue, and so he just kind of just throws it all in the mix. And so, as you alluded, we have that opening scene with the parents and the baby with the crib. That's when we get kind of introduced to Miss Skilling. That's her name, the witch, because they're looking out their window and she happens to be their neighbor. So that's how she comes into play. So then they get freaked out by this giant baby and they start following it outside, only to learn there are hundreds, if not thousands, more of these neighborhood, citywide children that have grown exponentially within seconds, minutes, and they're just overtaking the city. So you have a parade of bodies, naked bodies, just coming at parents. But the scary thing is that, like you alluded with the eye poking, they're doing all kinds of crazy things. They're running into things, they're breaking their arms and their legs, and they're just gross scenes. And your heart is kind of being pulled in two different directions because at the base of this, these are just babies.
And
So
you
you're
want to feel
wondering,
for them.
you do, you really do.
And there's no
And
emotion there.
maybe I'm a little off base because this is what horror is. It jars you, it pulls and tugs at your senses. So maybe Ennis is onto something here because he's obviously getting some visceral emotions from you and I as we read this. But my issue is the fluidity of the storyline. For me,
Yes.
I can't just have a good story and or a good visualization. Animation is great, drawings, coloring, that's wonderful, but I need them to mesh. I need it all to be an amazing thing. I can't just have one or the other. So if you have these really bizarre photos that you're kind of trying to mask yourself from and shield your eyes, you want the story to kind of run away with you, right? And I'm not getting that. I'm trying to shield my eyes from all this grotesque nudity and these babies just being obliterated in all these horrific ways. But again, guys, it's not babies, it's grown ass men and women. But the story isn't really giving me enough to pull me forward. So, you get a scene, they go obviously into the city to kind of assess the situation, almost like escape, if you will.
Yeah.
And they have a smaller boy too. We need to also allude to their
An older
younger son,
brother. The baby has
older.
their son who has grotesquely transformed does have an older brother who's got to be like
Yes.
maybe 6 or 7.
Yeah, I was putting him probably like around more like 6 to 8, somewhere in
Yeah.
that category, because he's very articulate. He doesn't say much though in the story. So you've got him, the parents, and Miss Skilling, and they're driving away from the neighborhood because the neighborhood is just inundated with all these adult babies. And then they get into the city to find out it's pretty much the same. They go to what they consider to be a safe haven, which is the hospital. And you would think that, you'd have doctors and nurses and everything, but it seems like the babies have just completely taken over at this point. So it makes you wonder, how long has this been going on? Again, no context of a timeline here. We have
Because
no understanding.
yeah, because you want to know what's also really funny when you go back to the hospital scene, you basically try and find out, and you never get the answer. Where did the doctors go? Where did the nurses go? There were no dead bodies. There was no one outside the hospital explaining anything. I will say, however, the hospital scene does actually have one of my laugh out loud moments. There are two of them in this book for me. And part that makes me laugh is how they escape the babies in the infant ward. They basically run down the stairs and all the babies stay on the top because they're terrified of the stairs. And I'm like, okay, that's smart. I give Garth Ennis props for that because that is exactly what babies are like when they're at the top of a set of stairs. They do not want to go down. Sometimes one will because they're just extra curious, but most babies, they are terrified of going down the stairs and they don't know how to do it.
Absolutely. So there are some elements that do just that. They make you laugh out loud, and you're like, okay, there has merit. But I don't feel that there's enough of those moments to really pull me in and say this is something I would recommend. I think if you're into the bizarro, because that's what we categorize it as in novelization form, bizarro horror, something that doesn't really make sense, that isn't exactly normal per se, that doesn't really have a category that it fits in. It's just like a bizarre neighborhood, a bizarre something that transpires within a family, but it's enough to create a story, but maybe not so much like a novel, maybe more like a novella. So I feel like this is a miniaturette novella, if you will, that just doesn't have a lot of substance, because after we leave our hospital, unfortunately, within that, we lose Miss Skilling, and that broke my heart, because that for me was I was rooting for her. I really felt like she was going to be our heroine in this story. She was going to have the answers. She was going to lead us back to, because obviously leaving the hospital, they realized they needed to get back to the house. She had the answers, maybe. Like there was, again, I felt like there was some connection to these kids and to her. And then to have her leave us in the hospital, it's like, okay, so what are we really living here for? Because when we go back to the parents, we don't get a lot of substance from them. They seem very confused. They seem like they kind of almost want the children to lead them, and to give them the answers. We eventually leave our hospital, and we get back on the road. We get back to the neighborhood, and it goes back to normal.
Sort of.
So
because that's where we get my second laugh out loud moment, and I'll explain why. So it's just like you're absolutely. But let me add to what you were saying. You're absolutely right. When you take a look at the parents and you take a look at Miss Skilling, it's like the conversations that they're having. It's like they're they're questioning the situation, but then they trail off into other topics. Like I think at one point in time they discuss things like politics and religion, and I'm just like, what are you talking about? What is going on here? Why are you guys not trying to figure out what is going on with these kids? And this
and if you remember, Miss Skilling kind of says that. She's like, that's what I don't like about people that have kids, is you just regurgitate all the stupid shit in your head and teach them the same dumb shit, and then they just become a prodigy of you. And I love that because it's so true. That's exactly what happens, But again, when she died, I just felt like hope died in this story.
Okay, but here's where I'm gonna have to refute you a little bit as a dad. Okay, because that's another thing. Because that's no, but that's the thing. It's like you want to teach your children the things that you learned, but then again, think about the kind of world that we're living in right now and parenting skills. I mean, I kind of love the fact that there's this new thing going around. Apparently, the idea of gentle parenting is sort of dying, and we're now heading into this new style of parenting called fuck around and find out parenting, where they basically let the kids run free and let them figure out what happens when they step on a nail, or when they slam their fingers in a door, or when they just keep not wanting to listen to mom and dad, and they're going to say, okay, do what you want and see what happens. But again, is that the right way to do things? No. But you know what? As a parent, you want to make sure that your kids turn out right. I mean, trust me, it's kind of really funny about how I have so many stressful days and sometimes very uncomforting nights, even though I've had good, productive days and everybody's happy and healthy. You're just so concerned about your child because you're just afraid that the worst can ever happen to the child. It's like, every single day I send my daughter off to daycare, even though I know she's going to have a good day, I'm always afraid, when am I going to get that call finding out, oh, she's coming home because she has a fever, or she fell and hurt herself, or broke her arm, or something like that. Like, you know, as a father, you want to be concerned, and that's the thing. I mean, Miss Skilling, I can understand where she's coming from, because sometimes people just throw bad ideas at their kids and they want their kids to follow those things. But that's also because of the fact that, they were taught certain things from their parents, and, they just want whatever worked for them to work on their children. But then comes that whole discussion of nature versus nurture, and that, my wife tells me the perfect story about how she and her brother were basically parented the exact same way, and one received it well and the other one rejected it. So let's just put it this way, everybody. Parenting is not easy. If you think it's ever going to be easy, it's not. From what I've actually heard is, the older the child gets, the harder it gets. And that's the
Well,
part
and
that's
let's
scaring
not
me.
forget too, a parent will always parent the first harder than the second. They will
That is
coddle the
true.
second, and then by the third, they're like pretty much FAFO, like
I don't
fend
know.
for yourself, kid.
I think it was completely backwards when with me growing up with my mom, and my mom basically babied her daughter because she was the youngest, she was the little girl, and basically threw me and my brother to the wolves.
Oh, no,
But we did it fine.
I was very much disciplined more strictly. I don't think that there was a lot of differentiation between my sister and I, but you can definitely see the coddling in the adult years versus with me, where I was kind of put out to fend for myself and figure it out kind of thing, work it out until it works out kind of thing. And where my sister was just kind of handed the answers, and now it's really showing in adulthood for
And
her,
that's another thing. And that's another thing about this book. It's like, as a parent, you want to feel certain things, especially when a story involving kids is. And this book did absolutely nothing for me. I actually am not going to lie to you. There were points in time where I'm like in the middle of this book and I'm just like, oh, just end already. I'm done with you. I can't stand this book anymore.
I
I
think the
felt
only thing for me,
terrible.
and I'm not a bio parent, I think that I was just anticipating these children to turn back into children, and then I didn't want to live with the aftermath of what that was going to look like on the pages. But that only happened to us a couple of times here. So I think that if that's a fear for you, go into this and you'll be okay. Again, when we've talked about the Ninth Circle, I haven't really recommended any of these titles to anyone. I think the only people that I can recommend this series to is, again, if you like the bizarro horror, if you're into things that just don't make a lot of sense, and if you also like your stories to not be necessarily beginning, middle, end. They are just kind of like thrown on a page, and it's just
It's a
weird
day in
and
the life
shocking.
kind of deal.
Absolutely, yeah. And it's just weird just to be weird. I think in a way this is kind of like a really fucked up slice of life. I really, I cannot pin it any other way. And I have nothing to go off of in terms of his previous work, but I think that also that's an advantage, because I don't think any of his previous work is anything like this. I think this is so vastly different from what he's known for.
Yeah,
I think
yeah.
well, I just think in a way, it's almost like he's trying to stir the pot. He's trying to like set this aside from everything he was before. That's
Yeah,
just how it feels to me.
because I mean, I didn't read Preacher, but I know so many people
I
love
did. I
Preacher.
did, and I love it. I love it. That's why I'm not sure what this is.
I
This
mean,
is just weird.
I think it's kind of funny that some of the biggest news that came out towards the end of this year was the fact that the title of The Darkness is coming back for like a whole new generation, and Mark Silvestri didn't even invite Garth Ennis back to write the book. He's basically going to be writing it and doing the artwork on it himself, and so I'm just like, that's great. But the other thing is, it's like, I read a couple of issues of the original Darkness. Garth Ennis did a great job. I read some of his mini series that he did for DC Vertigo, like Pride and Joy and The Unknown Soldier, and his one-shot Heartland, which is a take from the Constantine universe. So he used to do cool stuff, and I kind of feel that with this Ninth Circle, I think he's trying to just search for his relevance again, I guess. I mean, I will also say I don't want to spoil the little twist in the end, but this is all that I'm going to say about it. If you're a Simpsons fan, you'll get a kick out of it. It made me laugh. It kind of made me laugh.
Well, I
But it
will
didn't
say
save the
this.
book.
I don't go in with great expectations, but you know, definitely read it for yourself, because I
Yeah.
really hate to tell people not to read something. I am not that type of reviewer. I say go in, make of it what you will, and recommend it to whom you think should read it, or let it die with you. You know,
Yeah.
just, it's one of those things. I will give, if you're willing, I will give Gray Lady a chance. And also I heard about Mommy. I don't know if you've heard
You're
about
talking,
Mommy.
yeah, I was going to say there's another title that's out there. It's called Mommy Blog. I
Oh, Blog. Okay,
definitely feel
I
for
thought it was just
me
called
it
Mommy.
needs I think it needs a reread. I mean,
Okay.
if we want to at least go and just finish up the Ninth Circle, I kind of feel that it would do it justice. It's not like this is going to be a monthly series as we thought it was going to be, because unfortunately the Ninth Circle is not a monthly book anymore. But no, I would definitely not mind reviewing Mommy Blog, and I would not mind reviewing Gray Lady. And of course, when Stay Out of the Woods comes, I'm
Yeah,
going to read
that
Stay
looks
Out of
fun.
the Woods. But I did already tell the guy who runs my comic book store, I said, after Stay Out of the Wood comes out, cut me off. I'm done with Ninth Circle. I was very upset because, again, I had fun with Freddy the Fix. Blood Train was very much not
That
what I
was good.
expected. That was a
That
good
was
book.
good. I did of everything we've read, I did enjoy Blood Train, and I would recommend that to people.
Yeah,
And
Blood
what's
Train was
really good
fun.
about this is you don't have to read them all. Like, you can pick, you can just, choose what titles you want to read. If you want to do
Exactly.
what we're doing, read them all. But they're also vastly different and nothing intertwines.
Exactly. Yeah, they're all one shots. I mean, I know that there was a possibility of continuing Freddy the Fix, but at this point in time, I really don't know
I
what the
don't,
future holds for Ninth Circle. I really don't. But guys, I think that's going to wrap that one up. So, like I said, this is The Kids by Garth Ennis. You obviously know our take on it, but if you've read it, feel free to let us know. We'd like to have a conversation. I know there's a lot of you that are. I know that we have a small fan base right now, but it's slowly growing, which is great. And we have a couple of reasons as to why that's happening on the good end of things. But like I said earlier, leave a comment, let us know what you think about it, and we'll see you in the next Ninth Circle episode whenever this comes around.
I feel like we need Twilight music.
Oh Lord. Take care,
Bye.
everybody.